As you can see me, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our BWISE career chat. I know it's been a couple weeks, but we have been busy little bees coordinating things around the country, including our upcoming launch of our BWISE Bay Area. So hopefully those of you who are watching and are in the Bay Area can join BWISE next week at one of our upcoming events. So thank you all again for all our loyal viewers for joining us. For those of you who watched the replay, thank you, and for sharing the video as well. So as you all know, that Black Women in Science and Engineering is focused on empowering, encouraging, and supporting Black women in the science and engineering fields, or STEM, better yet. And we like to bring information to our members and to our network overall about things that we feel are important to us. So today we have the wonderful, the talented, the fabulous Patrice Yarbough, who I just touched her bio and it went away, but it's back. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She's gonna talk about something near and dear to her heart, and then we're going to finish up about an event that's going on here in Houston tomorrow. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Patrice Yarbough. She's an accomplished leader with proven success managing and directing research and development program for 22 years. She is committed to the advancement of science and technology, and she has a proven record of promoting the growth of basic and clinical research, working directly with the industry, government, university, and medical institutions. She is co-inventor on patents, scientific and medical journals. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of Houston in biochemical and biophysical sciences, and a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Houston as well. And she has a postdoc at the University of Texas Southwest Medical Center at Dallas. So, as you can tell, she's pretty accomplished. Dr. Patrice is. So, without further ado, I'll let her take it from there and share her story and her background, and then we're going to talk a little bit about broadening the participation for women in STEM. So, with that, Patrice,
Erica, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I appreciate it. I should mention right now that Erica and I actually spoke by phone for the first time just a few days ago. I've been very interested in what she's doing in BWISE. She understands that I've been a long-term member of AWIS, and I like to think of these as sister organizations that are both involved in creating more opportunity for women in science. So when she asked me, even though I knew that this was going to be on a Monday, she asked me if I wanted to do this. I thought, oh, sure, why not? I don't pass up very many opportunities to talk about foundation. So just let me say that I started on my journey to becoming a scientist 40 years ago. Just a little bit more than 40 years ago, when I entered into the University of Houston in 1976 as an undergraduate in biochemistry.
Wow.
And the rest is history, because 4 years later, I got my bachelor's, and I had started to work in the laboratory actually in my sophomore year. And even though that's pretty common these days, back in 1977, that was pretty rare. But because I didn't know how rare it was, and there were a number of faculty that were interested in having me work in the lab. There were no such things as paid internships at the time, but that was fine for me because I was really interested in figuring out if I really wanted to have this career in science, which is what I thought I had been wanting to do since I was in middle school. And I was sold pretty quickly. I was. At the end of those 4 years, I went to the Marine Biological Laboratory for 3 months, and I worked like I had never worked before. It was just being totally immersed in science and literally doing it around the clock, but playing hard around the clock as well in those times in the laboratory. So I was sunk. I mean, the truth of the matter is I was just sunk. I figured out my my passion in life. I've always been all about discovery. So at that point, I entered into the Ph.D. program also at the University of Houston, because in my senior year, I started to work on a project that I thought I might want to take through the Ph.D. program. At the time, I was looking at a microscopic nematode. We were looking at the developmental biology of it, but what I was really looking regulation of two iso enzymes and how they were working, one in the background and one specifically in muscle metabolism. So 5 years later, got my PhD, earned it, then went on to UT Southwestern, where I did a 3-year postdoc. It was an exciting time at UT Southwestern. It was actually the same time, it coincided with the time that Brown and Goldstein had won the Nobel Prize. Yeah, that's how old I am. But it was an incredible time. There was plenty of money that was flowing into UT Southwest. There was a lot of jazz, a lot of buzz about research. It was, I thrived. I used my postdoc to learn more yeast genetics. The common themes was gene regulation. And when I finished postdocing, I said I thought I wanted to do from the time that I entered into graduate school, and that was to have a career in the biotechnology sector. Now, coming from Houston at the time, because remember now, we're talking about 1989, there was very little biotech that was in Houston.
Okay.
So I had to relocate to the West Coast, and I took a position at a small company that is still functional today, called Gene Labs Technologies. They had 4 major programs. I was in the virus discovery program. I got hired into that program amazingly because of my work in gene regulation. And at the time, the thought process was that there might be some transcriptional regulation for how the virus code proteins were actually being transcribed. Well, it turns out that there was actually a translational regulation. I mention this because one of the questions that Eric had asked me before is, having now had a career in the biotech corridor, the biotech sector, academia, and government, and I have to tell you that I had only envisioned a career in biotechnology, private industry for myself. But what has been the common thread throughout nearly now 28 years since the postdoc is gene regulation, translational research. Those are my personal drivers with respect to the research that I'm doing. So 28 years later, I do research quite differently than I did early on. Most people who have been down this road realize that when you are funded, as I was, by the National Science Foundation as a graduate student, and then by the National Institute of Health as a postdoc, a lot of the value is placed upon the individual investigator.
Okay.
Over the years, though, in working in private industry, it's much, much more collaborative. You work very hard and very fast because you are dealing with something substantial like a product or that I was engaged in after we did all of the basic research for about 3 years and learned enough about how these viruses were actually being propagated. We were able to develop diagnostic kits based upon portions of the coat protein of the virus. At that point, it's going quickly because you've got a market, and the company did develop the diagnostic assay. I'm pleased to say that I am co-inventor on 8 different patents as a result of that work.
Wow.
In the biotech corridor, when you work in private industry, you sign away your individual patent rights to the company. But I will also tell you that the company was very generous in terms of how they rewarded those parties that were actually involved on the patents early in, based upon a significant contribution. I did viral discovery with 1989 till about 1996. And at that point, this project that I had been working on for about 7, 8 years at that point was moving into development. G-Labs was a small company. It was a discovery company. It was a research company. So they partnered with SmithKline Beecham to actually develop the vaccine. And so that prototype vaccine was developed. And then it's not that it was out of our hands, but with the company not being as engaged in the development, that was really SmithKline that took it forward. And they did. It was demonstrated that what we presented as a prototype vaccine turned out to work very well, not only in the animal models that it was tested in, but also in the first 2 phases, one for phase 1 and one for phase 2, which was done in combination with the Walter Reed Army Institute in Nepal.
Okay.
So those last couple of years that I was at G-Labs Technologies, I was able to move into a senior director position because the company, frankly, was interested in us replicating the success that we had with hepatitis E on some other hepatitis viruses. And so I worked for a while on hepatitis G as well as hepatitis C.
How many hepatitis?
I decided it was time to make my way back to Texas. And there was a small biotech company that I was interested in, so I came back to Texas in 2000, and I worked for Chinox, once again on viruses, but this time I was on the other side of the gate, if you will. Instead of the virus discovery, I was now not in the preclinical, but in the clinical phases, where we were looking at prototype molecules that were being tested for efficacy against HIV. And there were a number of company changes, mostly that company was absorbed by the large company Genentech. And at that point, I had moved 5 times. My husband had moved 5 times with me. My children at that point were in elementary school and middle school. And as I tried to continue to do what I had been able to do successfully for 15 years, and that was to keep some balance in my life. So I decided that I was back in Texas, which was where I wanted to be, and that I was going to stay. So here's where I tell many people, young women in particular, that you have to have some flexibility. I chased that to the program, and I'm really happy that I did it all the way through to the point that we had a prototype vaccine. But at some point, I decided that I wanted to define where I wanted to live, but I still want that. So after leaving Tanox, I went to UTMB, and UTMB was very interested in me for what appeared at the time to be a bit of an unusual circumstance, because they wanted to actually bridge and to build more collaborations with their faculty and private industry. So they were not looking for a typical faculty-based tenure track professional. They were looking for a professional that had some private industry experience. And I thought I was going to retire at UTMB. But things happen again.
Right.
And there was a new president that came on board, and there were some changes in the balance of education and clinical research and basic research. And at that point, the skills were tipping slightly away from the basic research, which was still my interest. So I left UTMB and went to fill a position that there were some gaps in it as a result of the office that I was originally. So that's how I ended up at NASA. Oftentimes people ask, how did you end up at NASA? Because I'm not the typical NASA employee. First of all, I'm not civil servant. I need contractors. There are more contractors than there are civil servants, but contractors and civil servants work hand in hand to get the job done. And the contractor that I initially was working for was USRA, and when their contract with NASA ended just less than a year ago, it was July of last year, then I did the contractor shift to KBR Wireless. So what I do at NASA is, as a contractor, I manage the confined isolation studies. NASA has analogs, which are habitats or platforms that are designed to mimic something that NASA wants to study. So we want to be able to simulate ISS because there are very few that travel to the International Space Station. So we have a confined habitation habitat. It's about 630 square feet. It's on campus at Johnson Space Center. And I'm proud to say that we have done 3 campaigns, one of 7 days, 14 days, and 30 days over the last 3 years. And my team and I just initiated the first of 4 missions of Campaign 4. So as we speak, we have subjects that are inside of the HAB and have been for the past week. And that is a lot less physiological work, a lot more psychological assessments. So you can see that with each new position that I've taken, I have amassed new knowledge. I have a steep learning curve. I'm learning a whole lot about psychological assessments. But once again, the key for me was we're looking for markers in the blood that might be early indicators of the human response to stress that is recognized in these psychological assessments. If we can define those, we will be able to have some very tight, manageable assessors that we can use to manage stress. Because along with all of the physiological conditions, if we go to Mars, or we travel anywhere out of low orbit space, that travel is going to be extended. And long duration in confined habitation will be stressful. And so NASA is getting ahead of the curve and trying to understand how does the body respond to stress so that we can eventually develop some countermeasures. So, oh my gosh, I think in less than 10 minutes, I told you what I've been doing for the past 28 years.
Yes, you've told us a lot. Can you hear me?
So, yes, I can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, so along the way, Erica has come to understand that along with being a female scientist and having a full-time job and being guided still by my love for discovery, I've also had the passion for increasing the women in science, and I have a spectacular passion for wanting to increase the number of underrepresented minority women in science. There are very few of us in science. There are even fewer who have bench, hardcore, technical science careers for an extended period of time. I fit into that category, and so I always try and do as much as I can to try and encourage the next generation of young women to actually take this up as careers. I was at the March for Science a couple of weeks ago, and I gave just a short talk, and I spoke a lot about AWIS, how it has been a key part of how I've been able to connect with women over
Now,
the years.
what is
And I'm looking
AWIS?
forward to having that same sort of expansion with WISE, which is yet another organization for women in science.
So, Patrice,
yes,
for the people who are watching who don't know what WISE or AWIS is, can you tell a little bit about those organizations?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So let me start with AWIS, which is the acronym for Association for Women in Science. This is an organization that came into existence in 1972. I joined it when I was a graduate student. I can't remember if it was 1983 or 1984, but I had been in it 1 year before I got my Ph.D. Okay. So they had been around for about 10 years at the time. This organization, AWIS, is an advocacy organization that has done a number of things over the years to encourage, but also to help women sustain careers in the sciences and in engineering. There are a number of chapters. I have been I've been in Texas, and now with the Gulf Coast Houston chapter. When I lived out in the Bay Area, I was a part of the Stanford chapter. It has that common goal that WISE has, WISE being the organization that goes by the acronym of WISE, which is Women in Science and Engineering. I don't remember exactly when that one came into existence. I know that one of the older chapters here in Texas is the one at Texas A&M. I had the pleasure to do the keynote with them a couple of months ago, and they're celebrated 25 years. So these are organizations that have been around for 25 years. These organizations have done tremendous work in gathering women together. Both of these organizations understand, however, that even though there has been a significant increase and significant improvement in the number of white women who publish, white women who gain access to tenure, white women who gain access to more pay equity. It has been a goal of AWIS since they created a diversity task force, and that was back in, I was at UTMB back in 2006, that we need to be figuring out more effective ways to have that sort of success translate to women of color. And so it has definitely created that need for a diversity task force at AWIS, and the need that Erica and some of her cohorts are creating with the Black Women in Science and Engineering organization, where we're focusing on what's unique, because there are some very unique things that women of color experience and have to deal with on a daily basis that our quote-unquote majority sisters do not. And so we have to work it, and we need to work it collectively so that we can bring value to and increase the number of all women in science.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so you did a phenomenal job of kind of going over those two organizations. And what I've seen is a lot of time minority serving organizations, they may partner with other minority serving organizations, but they don't always partner with the majority organizations. And I think that's key, both for exposure, networking, and, they need to see that we're here. I get asked all the time is, are there very many people in STEM? And such an incredulous question to me, because I'm thinking NSBE has been around for 50 years or 40 years, not educating, but supporting Black excellence in the fields of engineering. And NOBSHE, National Organization of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers, has been around equally a long time. And so there are generations of people, but it seems like we're kind of scattered everywhere. There's, not a lot of clusters of us. So it appears both to us as individuals and also to our brothers and sisters who don't look like us, that there are not very many of us. And I think for those of you who've seen the movie, it makes it seem like, that was a rarity when we know that people have been getting degrees and PhDs in the sciences since the 40s and the 50s, just without any recognition or accolade. So thank you for all the things that you do, Patrice, in that regard.
I agree with you. It's important that we need to continue to remind people that it is not that we have not been contributors to the landscape of science. One of there are several organizations that have focused where there have been trailblazers in the various sciences, and a lot of activity has been devoted to the undergraduates, and it's a great place to start, because into the pipeline, then there's nothing to sustain. But ABRCAMS, which is an incredible organization, that is the one organization where minority undergraduates and some graduate students as well, but primarily undergraduates, actually gather together every year for a meeting. And because most of frankly, all of my education had been done at primary colleges and universities, I mean, the University of Houston, the University of Texas Southwestern, et cetera, the ABRCAM chapters, and those chapters were mostly created to provide a service to students that were primarily at historic Black universities or Hispanic universities or Native American universities, because ABRCAMS actually is broad and covers all of that. They cover that descriptive of underrepresented minorities based upon how the NIH defines it. And when I started going to those meetings just 5 years ago, I too was amazed that there are 2,000 students that are attending these conferences, and they are presenting incredible work. So there are students that are entering into the pipeline. We are losing them. And I feel that as professionals, we have a tremendous responsibility to encourage those students, but to do more than that. We need to be creating opportunities for them to move into. And that's when you have these organizations like either something that is directed toward a minority organization or directed toward a gender organization, where advocacy is really important. Because you need oftentimes more than just a mentor. I think most of us can't get enough of them. But in addition to them, you need advocates, because the advocates are the ones that are going to be able to create the opportunity for the students as well. But they exist. It is the case, however, that when you look at the numbers, relatively speaking, we're still very small. I mean, at most graduate students, at most graduate student programs that are not at minority universities, your graduate student population for underrepresented minorities will be somewhere between 1% and 5%.
That's true.
Okay? That's it. So with 1% to 5%, and then you divide that over all of the variety of interests that we can have, just like everybody else has, then you end up with the onesies and the twosies in a particular discipline. So yes, it is true that there may be very small numbers in individual disciplines because we are very spread out. But that's why we need organizations that reach out to a broad spectrum. And here the broad spectrum is STEM. So if we look at STEM, we're going to be engaging engineers, which have a thought process about discovery that's a little different from a scientist, but the scientist discovers it and the engineer actually makes utility out of it, puts it to work, develops it. And those go hand in hand. So I think the concept of STEM is an empowering one.
So what advice would you give? Our BWISE focuses on middle level women, because I think even though there is such a need at the beginning of the pipeline, there is attention, at least at the beginning of the pipeline. There's almost no attention, and that's why you have so many people who are dropping out. 40% of women drop out of the STEM pipeline after 5 years. It's because I guess the assumption is, you made it through high school, you made it through college, and now you've got a job and you're working. So you are a success. You must be doing what you're supposed to be doing and doing it the right way. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. And I think that's exactly when things get more complicated, because you have certainly less people who would be encouraging you and cheering you on. Now you're women of color in particular. Now you're not the, precocious intern roles that I want. And so,
Right.
it's a lot harder to get at that level.
Yes, that is an excellent point because, I was quoted several years ago when NSF advanced program that it is not enough for our universities to educate a vast majority of students. They must also employ those students. And what we have seen is that our students of color and this applies for both males and females, are getting through the pipeline. So that tells me that they've got the commitment. I can't imagine that anyone would question the commitment of a minority scientist who has done the hard work of earning that doctorate, has done the hard work and made the sacrifice to launch their careers as a postdoc, because that is what happens during your postdoc. You launch that career. You're no longer in training. You have become that independent investigator, and you are now competitors for some, collaborators for others, but you're establishing yourself. Depending upon where you go and how inviting the environment is, once again, now there's not a group of graduate students, even as small as it might be. It's maybe only one or two faculty. And so those isolations are having impact. I mean, I think about it frequently. NASA is spending plenty of money trying to understand the stressors of being in confined habitation. We're going to learn a lot with respect for the astronauts, but like many of the NASA studies, we're going to learn things for the general population as well. And one of the things that I think we're going to learn is that stress is real, and how it impacts a person's performance is also real. So when people find themselves in isolation, in the absence of encouragement for whatever those reasons may be, it should not be too surprising to anybody that their performance is not going to be as great. And after a university has invested in the investigator, you would think that they would want to continue to invest in them and to develop their careers. But that has been missing, and that was indeed the reason why these organizations came into existence, so that the investigators themselves are trying to create a community that they can depend upon, where they can foster each other. And we've seen it makes a difference on a small scale. We need to be able to expand the scale of that, though.
Right. It's amazing to me that, we can figure out how to get people to far-flung planets, but we're still kind of scratching our heads about the impact that stress has on things like that. And I think because science and engineering continues to be so male-dominated, it appears that there's this culture of just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, suck it up, tough it out, when the majority of the people who are saying these things are able to do this are at the top of the hierarchy, right? They don't have to deal
Yes.
with discrimination. They don't have to deal they don't have to deal with people underestimating their capabilities. So I guess if I were someone like that, I would have a leg up and I would be able to handle stress, or I wouldn't have the feelings of isolation that many people, women of color and women in general, have. So I think, good for you for that work. And hopefully, a lot of it will come out for use with the general public and government as well, because I think that is so important. All the people who I've reached out to in this BWISE journey over the last year and a half have been like, oh, this is so great, because there is a shared experience for women in STEM. And there are a few exceptions to the women I've encountered that, they've had supportive bosses or worked for progressive companies, but I can is by and large the exception and not how most of us have lived our careers in STEM.
Right.
So I applaud the work that you all are doing and researching in STEM, and hopefully they'll look at that for both gender and also other things as well, because we know that everyone is not the same. Some of the medical tests in medicine right now are based on a certain type of male, a white male, and we know that they don't represent all body types. So I hope that that gets extended to women and other ethnicities in their experience at NASA as well.
So you've touched on something that has been very important to me. You heard me say that in my first, when I launched my career as a junior scientist and worked my way up to the senior scientist, I was at GeneLabs Technologies, and all of that was preclinical research. But when you move into clinical research, you're talking about people, right? And so that HIV research that I was engaged in Houston, that was the clinical research. And there are rules. NIH has guidelines that literally requires investigators to enroll and minorities at percentages that will minimally be consistent with the percentages that are in the population that those drugs and those molecules are designed to be used for. So the truth of the matter is, if you are talking about a blockbuster drug, something for diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, as was the work that we were engaged in, then you look at the general population, right? You've got anywhere from 15, maybe 18% African Americans over the United States. Some places will be about 20%. So that means 1 in 5 of your subjects in your studies should be African Americans. Half of the population is women, so you should be running studies where half of them are women. That is happening better than it ever has before, but there is still not complete parity. And there are a number of reasons. Not all of them are physiological. Some of them are societal reasons as well. But I have been a strong proponent for all classes of people, various minority groups engaging in the clinical research. Because when a blockbuster drug hits the market, it needs to work for everybody that's going to use it. And if minorities don't enroll in studies, then the data that is needed for them does not exist. But that was kind of a sidebar. One of the things I wanted to say is, for years, it has become very obvious that what often tumbles many of our minorities and many women in science are not the major things that are so obvious, not those overt activities where, somebody slams the door in your face like it in the Hidden Figures movie. It's not happening like that. It's really quite overt now. It's not overt. It's really quite coveted now. And it's been demonstrated that it is the small things that happen day after day that kind of pile up on each other. Little things. As a working female, as a working mother, if you just think about that, you miss the meeting, up your kids, or you're trying to do TTA, and so you're not available on an evening to work, dinner, and small thing. But that one dinner, well, what you didn't know was what was being discussed at the dessert bar.
Right.
And then you show up the next morning at the meeting, and everybody who was at the dessert bar that night before have some prior knowledge and some familiarity with it. Whoever wasn't there doesn't. So one of the things I tell women, and I've been just very blessed here because I've had a very strong and supportive family, but my husband in particular has just been a jewel. And we manage that with respect to our kids. I tell every woman in science, you need a buddy. Everybody needs a buddy. Preferably a buddy who cohabitates with you, lives in your house with you, because you will be surprised how often there will be that meeting, that phone call, somebody's going to be late. My kids were never picked up late from work, from daycare, but they were often the last ones, because I was calling my husband saying, hey, can you cover for me today?
Right.
That sort of thing. But they're small things, and those small things build up, and then people get used to maybe you not being there and make the wrong assumption that you don't want to be there.
Right.
And then all of that rolls up over time. So there are societal issues as well that are a part of it. It's been demonstrated that you can be very skilled in science. You can be very communicative. But if the environment that you are working in is not open to your participation, you have a hard road. You have a hard role.
We're gonna probably look into opening that discussion up. I speak all the time about the very first part of your career, and it doesn't mean that you have to go work for a conglomerate, but it does mean that you do not take a job, regardless of the tempting salary they offer, with a non-progressive, non-supportive, non-diverse company. It can do immeasurable damage to because it's hard to get out sometimes, especially once you get married and start having kids and they pay you well. So you don't want to disrupt that part of your life. And now you're stuck. You can't climb up the ladder. I think that's, one of the things that, yes, that's one of the things that I want to make sure that, certainly the women coming behind us know. But then for those of us who made that wrong choice, because you certainly could get off track in your career, you've made that wrong choice, you've taken that position with that non-supportive company, you got to, for those, I haven't seen the movie, but for those of you who've seen the movie Get Out, there's a horror movie called Get Out. So for those of you who are in situations like that, we need to get you out. We need to, get you networked, get you, notified, because not, forget your career, beyond the career is, life. But what's more important, and I see this so much, is the internal damage that it does. I have several members, certainly here in Houston, who've worked in energy, who, are shaken. They are so, diminished and, left with, poor self-esteem that I'm not sure if, they'll ever recover from, their experiences working in this still very male-dominated industry. So while I think some people probably think it sounds very militant, it is militant until you've experienced it yourself, right? Until you've been locked out of meetings or called out of your name or had your subordinates tell you they're not going to listen to you. All of which things I've heard my members tell me has happened to them. So I think it's critically apparent. We're doing the work. Kids are doing the work to go into STEM. Parents are helping kids choose careers in STEM. Now it's time for these corporations, these universities, and these government institutions to step up and do their role. And we don't mean just give less than 1% of your money. It's time for you to change your culture and make some real changes if you want these women to stay in STEM.
So this is where I think, the organizations can be very, very helpful. That the women, the more senior women, have a responsibility to the junior women. Part of it is, I think about how it was for me when I took that first job, and I will tell you, I truly did land my dream job that first time around. I was with that company for 13 years, and it had just incredible opportunities for me to grow and to thrive and to go outside of the laboratory and to be engaged in the patents and to be engaged in the business side of it and all of the above. But not everybody can say that their first as successful as mine was. It was successful. And as a result of it, it helped me establish a very high standard with the conditions under which I wanted to work. Because I knew that they existed. I knew that it was possible because I had lived through it to actually work somewhere where people did welcome your ideas. They were receptive to your intellect, and they expected you to contribute. When that doesn't happen, it can really derail you. And even though I don't know what that feels like firsthand, I think if that happens early in the career, we could lose a creative mind to science for good. And it happens. Students come up 3 after they have earned these PhDs, worked these postdocs, they're throwing in the towel, usually around the time of tenure or around the time that a person might be making that switch from the junior scientist to a mid-career scientist. Here's where I think the more seasoned scientists can be instructive, can actually teach on what sort of homework you need to be doing about each company that you are engaged in. I tell students, just like you need selection of your graduate advisor, you needed to do your homework. You needed to find out what sort of work they were involved in, if that's the kind of work that you like, if how they've organized their laboratories, what the hierarchy is, how do the graduate students and the postdocs and the technicians all work together. There's no classes that teach that to our students.
No.
And so we need to inform our students. That's one part of it. They need to be they should be expecting it. And I spent very few years in academia. I was there for 5 years. But I also will tell students in particular, and I tell young investigators, your supervisors have a responsibility to you. You should be putting them to work. For the graduate advisor, it is their responsibility to do a good job, to educate a student, not just to complete a study, but to become an independent investigator. The supervisor should be the very same thing. They should be creating opportunity for their support. But when that works, then it becomes a win-win for the entire team as well as the individual. We should maybe have another conversation that talks about the differences, between a mentor and an advocate and somebody who fosters you, but somebody who creates opportunity for you.
Right.
But the reality is, it's not likely your peers that are going to be creating opportunities for you.
No.
Remember, they're running that parallel track.
Right.
That's going to be somebody who is ahead of the game, who knows what are some of the next things. So one of the examples that I give, because I get this question all the time when it's asked, well, why are there so few like you, Patrice? And, I first ask the question to be sure I really understand what it is that a person is asking. But if they are asking, why are there so few women in science who have had sustainable careers for 30 years, I also remind them that for anybody to sustain a career for 30 years is an awesome accomplishment.
Right.
minorities should not have to face the assumption of zero failure rate. It's just unfair.
That's right.
It's just unfair,
That's
right?
right.
So there's going to be some failure. But when you only have 5 and 1 drops out, then the presumption is, you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
Versus 1 out of 100, people start to draw conclusions that are actually wrong.
That's true.
And I tell it there. Usually, when the question is, well, where are the talented students because I can't find them, or where are the talented senior, junior scientists that have the potential to become senior scientists, and they say they can't find them, I usually answer that question with a question. Did you look?
That's right.
Did you look?
That's right.
Did you look?
That's
you
right.
know, absolutely. So they're there. They're there.
That's
and
right.
we have a responsibility to them as well. And for some companies, the reality is it is going to be the case that they're going to need a good reason for it. And if good moral judgment isn't a good reason, then we come up with really good business reasons for it. You know, if you're launching products for a diverse community, you need to have a diverse community that's represented in those designs.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
That's right.
It's just as simple as that. So the other thing, you know, that I wanted to touch on as well is, but it is important that when groups are not recognized for their contribution, as has been the case many years for women, that women organize and create those groups that then do organize and represent women. And so one of the things that you know, because I expect to see you tomorrow, is the local chapter of AWIS, the Gulf Coast chapter, every year has a reception followed by a speaking engagement by one woman that they select as their outstanding female scientist for the year. And this is someone who needs to be accomplished. So we're talking about typically middle to senior level women who have had accolades beyond 20 plus years and have also had a contribution back to the greater Houston area as well. And I'm very pleased to say that this year the woman who has it for that by the Gulf Coast chapter of AWIS is Dr. Pamela Dinkins. And she is a NASA civil servant. She is a gifted Black woman who has contributed to NASA for nearly 40 years and has contributed to the ongoing success of students. She has been a beacon for young women of color who want to go into careers in science, because she was blazing this trail in the 1960s. And so I'm very pleased to say that this year AWIS will be recognizing her. So we have a big event that is occurring tomorrow at 6 o'clock at the Onstead Auditorium at MD Anderson in the Houston Medical Center. So we've been getting the word out. And I'm looking forward to being able to personally congratulate her, because she's done a wonderful, wonderful work. And this is an incredible award. They have honored women from Baylor College of Medicine, MD Anderson. There was another NASA woman that was recognized, and some of the university. There's been a Rice University woman as well. So this is a big deal. And it has also been shown that when others don't recognize you, then organize amongst yourself.
That's right.
And find those talented, because those people become beacons. They become incredible encouragement for our youth.
That's
so
right.
I'm a real proponent. I support that totally.
Absolutely. Pamela was so kind to come out to an event that BWISE hosted, and that's how I met her. Year's movie, and she is just as intelligent as she is kind. And so I'm excited to attend. And when I saw that, because I participate with AWIS, but I don't go to all their events. So as I was just scanning the internet, I saw that event and I said, oh, well, this is where we will be. This is where BWISE. This is where BWISE will be. We will be out, and she is a BWISE member, so we will support. Yes, you are. Patrice is a member. Look for new exciting changes with BWISE on the horizon, but we want to make sure that not only do this, but we show up in numbers to salute her and let the broader population know that we encourage her and we aspire to have as long and fruitful a career as she has. And we are here. So stop asking where they are, because here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. Here we go.
That's right. We're here. And we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. So I'm excited. Hopefully those of you all
hiring a whole new generation.
Yes, we are. We are. Hopefully those of you who are in the Houston area, and please, if you're connected to me on LinkedIn, feel free to register. I think ability, but we don't know how.
It's a large auditorium.
It's a large auditorium, so
we can accommodate you, and there'll be a nice reception as well. So there'll be an opportunity for the attendees to actually listen to Dr. Dinkins' talk. She's got a exciting title, which gives me every reason to believe she's going to be talking about some of those forks in the road and how they can create opportunities for us as well.
Absolutely. So it's going to be great. So those of you in the Houston area, hope to see you there. Of course, we'll take pictures as we do with every event we attend, so that not just our members, but those, I've got probably almost 7,000 connections, and you'd be surprised how many people reach out to me and say, I didn't know. I didn't know that, they won't say, of course, directly, but I didn't know so many women were doing so many incredible things. So we take pictures not for, but so the broader community can see these things as well. So share it with your diverse network to come out. It's important that everyone, not just Black women, come out to support her and hear what she's doing and the incredible work she has led over the years, but bring your coworkers, your next door neighbors, everyone to come out and experience this and ask some questions. I'm sure she's going to have some very interesting tidbits about what she's accomplished at NASA, and maybe she'll even share some things about Hidden Figures if she has some insight about what that was like. Maybe I'm trying to hype the event up. Maybe she knows Katherine Johnson or something. I don't know. I'm just saying she may have something she wants to share with us that you can only get if you go. So you all have to come out, for those of you who are in the Houston area. So with that, I will ask Patrice for her parting thoughts. And boy, Patrice, I tell people all the time that this hour goes so fast. Because it really is like, having a cup of coffee with a good girlfriend. And so we both learn lots of useful information, but it's also fun. And usually we have questions, but this one has been so action-packed. I know that you've shared a lot, but in parting, do you have some thoughts or advice or something you'd like to share with the BWISE family?
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, there are power in numbers. So the more of us that can identify each other, I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised in just how much we can accomplish in terms of making it better for the next generation. But, we're going to make it better for us as well.
That's right.
Because as Erica and I have been talking about, there's a lot of attention that is based upon the recruitment. New recruits, bringing students into the pipeline. But I am very, very interested in doing everything that we can to support those women that are already made that commitment, already in the pipeline, who have the potential to truly be major contributors to science. And we need to connect with you so that we can learn from you and that we can collectively build our numbers. It is really all about creating a community of a diverse science. And if we can do that, then we can encourage a diverse science workforce. And that's ultimately what we need.
Absolutely. Awesome. That was perfect. That was perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself.
So maybe, we'll get some comments that will come out of this, and in the future we can maybe do a more directed talk that might be related to, maybe specific questions or something that somebody actually has. But I hope I'm kind of giving you a broad view of at least what this one scientist nearly 30 years career has been like.
Yes, this has been great. We did this kind of rushed because we were trying to make sure that we encouraged people. So hopefully our view got out of it. And in the future, like we typically do, we typically promote this for a couple weeks so that people can participate. But in the future, I would love Patrice, both for you to come back on the show. And also, I would love to host a dinner or a brunch with you as our featured speaker here in Houston. That way people can, look at you and touch you and ask you questions directly and just have a wonderful time. We've had brunches and dinners around Houston, and they've just been so, I think, wonderful that we can get together and fellowship. As the Bible says, where two are gathered in my name. It's just incredible. I think, for all the wonderful things that we do here on YouTube Live, not my beloved Blab. Blab was the platform I had at first, but nothing compares to being able to look someone directly in their eye and have a hand on your shoulder and encouragement that way. So stay tuned. We will be planning some events, and we would love to have you come back and join us. And that's it. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, of course, Patrice Yarbough, for all her wonderful insight and last minute ability to jump on, deal with technological issues, and still have a wonderful show. Thank you for all our loyal BWISE listeners. I'm pretty sure who I know our viewers are tonight. So we will post this up on our BWISE website, which is www.bwiseusa.org, for folks to look at the replay. And please share the videos. We talk about a lot of things that will be beneficial. So if you don't live in Houston, you could still share it with someone across the country or the world. So stay tuned for our next upcoming videos. We don't have an agenda quite yet, but just as soon as we get that, we will let you all know. And once again, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time. Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.